Good afternoon and welcome everyone, especially welcome the speakers who are kindly accepted the invitation to come and talk for this international workshop on nature, value and normativity. The topic, the relation between these three words deserve maybe a little comment to begin with. Normativity is a wide phenomenon which involves legal norms. Usually we think about that about normativity, but there are also norms which are not laws of the state, at least. Or many people believe there are such laws, like moral laws. When we talk about normativity, we generally refer to phenomena which are involved in both these kinds of laws. But we speak about normativity also in relation to human action, without implying, for the reason there are moral laws or legal laws. For example, we think that there are constraints on action, and then we speak about normativity of action in that sense. So our question is not only about legal norms today, but about normativity in general, and its relations with value and with nature. In talking about value, one does not imply that there are values. That's just one way of explaining a more general phenomenon that value refers to. And the phenomenon is that we, humans, make judgments. We judge our actions, the actions of other people, as good or bad, right and wrong. And that is, of course, related to normativity. So we want to ask, what are the judgments which ground normativity in all its forms, legal, moral, or just normativity of action? And nature is related to that because when we judge, when we make judgment, very often we base our judgments on facts. And so the question is, what kind of facts can ground value judgments? Natural facts, but what is nature? What does nature mean? In the history of thinking, we have different conceptions of nature, and depending on how different people understood nature, they gave different accounts on how human judgments are related to normativity. This explains, just very briefly, the relation between the three words and how these two words will be connected. What different theories can say about that connection will be the topic which will emerge, will be discussed during the workshop in the next 2 days. I will say more. I will just leave the speakers to present the lectures, and that will take about 2 hours and a quarter, so they will speak 3/4 of an hour each. We may break before, maybe for 5 minutes, between the second and the third talk, maybe. But after that, from 3:30 until 5, we'll split up in groups. We already made the 4 teams there. There will be 4 groups. Each group will discuss 3 different questions. Each speaker, at the end of his or her talk, will present 4 questions or 4 problems, 1 for each group. Then when the groups split up, they have half an hour to discuss each question. Each group will receive 3 questions, 1 for each of the speakers. So you will have half an hour for each question, and we'll try to answer the question or address in a way the problem which is presented. We don't need to find, let's say, a joint view that unifies the group. We can just say the group is split, but we would like to know why it's split, on the basis of what arguments. So it is very good if there are big fights in the groups, that's the hope, but the fights have to be philosophical fights, so they have to be based on arguments. We want to hear good arguments at the end. Each group will have a chairman that has been already appointed, but they should also nominate or elect or accept the volunteer offering of a representative. And the representative, tomorrow, after the last discussion session, will sit on a round table and present the results of what was said in the groups to the speakers. And so a discussion about the results reached by each group will take place. Professor Fuchs received his Magister in Literature, Art History and Philosophy from University of Vienna, and then his PhD in Philosophy from University of Vienna. He then got also an habilitation, which is a German second sort of PhD, from the University of Bamberg. His interests are the history of early modern philosophy, metaphysics, and natural law theories. He held positions as assistant at the University of Munich and University of Bamberg, and he is currently a Privatdozent professor at the University of Bamberg. He is also the acting director of the Forschungsstelle Normen begründen at Bamberg University, and this is the center in the conjunction with which we are organizing these workshops. Is also a organizer. So thank you very much, and looking forward to your talk.
So thanks, Gabriele, for the kind introduction, and I'm also very happy that I had the opportunity to be here today and talk about a topic which I slightly changed when working on the talk. It's in the new title is Two Paradigmatic Forms of Natural Law, Natural Right Theory, Aquinas and Spinoza. First of all, I sometimes tend to become to speak not loud enough, so if you don't understand me, just raise a hand or do anything, or throw something in the front and hit me so that I know.
Make the closer.
Yeah, closer.
Move the microphone instead of moving yourself.
Okay. So give me a sign if you don't understand me. And I also would welcome you would invite you to ask any questions about my talk. Because what I'm going to talk about today is in some kinds related to many of the questions Erin Kelly has just raised in her talk, but in another way it goes in another direction. It goes in more the direction of asking what is the last source of such a phenomenon like normativity. And questions like these were traditionally, and not just traditionally, but also in our times, John Finnis answered, for instance, with the concept of natural law. So today I want to present to you two, as I think, paradigmatic forms of natural law theory, not only in my opinion, and I would ask you at the end of this, not forward only one question, as we have agreed for all of the groups, namely, what do you think of the two natural law, natural right theories, namely of Aquinas and Spinoza. Okay, so here we have the two guys, Aquinas on the left, Spinoza on the right, with the dates of birth and death. So, okay, if you look up the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and if you enter the terms natural law theory, you will find two authors discussing this concept, choosing different aspects which they discuss, namely John Finnis and Mark Murphy. Finnis claims to concentrate more on the legal aspect of natural law theory, while Mark Murphy focuses more on the ethical aspect of this concept. However, both authors, although taking these different perspectives towards natural law, named one primary natural law theoreticist whose theory already combines, so I think, everything that is to say about natural law. That is, of course, Thomas Aquinas. In other words, both authors agree that when talking about natural law, understood as the law of reason, Aquinas provides us with the paradigmatic natural law theory. That's why Finnis' own approach, which he developed in his very influential book, Natural Law and Natural Rights, first published in 1980, does very much rely on his interpretation of Aquinas. Finnis here, in this book, Natural Law and Natural Rights, interprets Aquinas' natural law as a basic, normative, and universal structure of the principles of practical reason. These principles imply what Finnis calls basic goods. These basic goods are self-evident to all rational agents. Why do they have to be self-evident? Well, the reason is because this way it is guaranteed that these universal goods or universal precepts of natural law are really known to all the agents and thus can have a normative force upon them. Finis gives two arguments for this thesis, that is, of the self-evidence of basic goods as the principles of practical reason. First, he argues that they have to be self-evident in the way that they cannot be deduced from higher principles, because then they wouldn't be what they claim to be, namely first self-evident principles. They then would draw their evidence from the higher principles they are deduced from. That's the first point. Second, the basic goods are what Finis calls extensions, not deductions, but extensions of one even more fundamental principle of practical reason, which Finis takes also from Aquinas, namely the so-called primum principium practicum, the PPP, the first practical principle. This practical principle reads, good is to be done, evil is to be avoided. Bonum est faciendum, malum est evitandum. The PPP, the primum principium practicum, is self-evident itself. Well, good is to be done, evil is to be avoided, it's self-evident, and thus mediates this self-evidence to all the other more concrete basic goods as principles of practical reason. This would be more or less one of the core elements of Finis' natural law theory, at least of his theory from 1980. He has reworked some of his basic ideas. And this is also the reason why, for Finis, Aquinas is so paradigmatic. However, Finis' interpretation of Aquinas has heavily and I think successfully been criticized by Pauline Westermann. Westermann argues that Finis and his followers, like Grisey, misread or misunderstand a very crucial aspect of Aquinas' natural law theory. The fundamental principle of practical reason, the PPP, the primum principium practicum, in Aquinas is self-evident, indeed, but, as Westermann argues, only by virtue of its merely formal character. Westermann, in other words, argues that the reason why this principle is self-evident is simply its, in a Kantian sense, analytical structure. That good is to be done is already implied in the notion good, as well as that evil is to be avoided. There is, however, no information included what exactly is good and what is bad. If we want to know what the good that is to be done or what the bad that's to be avoided within the boundaries of Aquinas' natural law theory really are, then, according to Westermann, we have to go a step further. That is, we have to ask either for what Aquinas calls God's eternal law, that is, we have to take up a metaphysical or theological perspective, or we have to refer to Aquinas' theory of natural inclinations. I will come to that later, what it is. Anyway, both ways are ways which Finis rejects. The point is, for Westermann, since Finis does neither rely on a metaphysical nor on a natural dimension, different from reason alone, but only on the criteria of rational self-evidence, he, according to Westermann, is not able to provide his theory of natural law with any content. And he overlooks even more some of the major features of Aquinas' paradigmatic natural law theory. So the point is, first, he doesn't give a valid natural law theory himself, and second, he misinterprets Aquinas. Okay, the second author I just pointed at, namely Mark Murphy, the other author within the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, also holds that Aquinas' view is paradigmatic of the natural law position. However, he seems already to react on this kind of criticism. When he puts up a list of 7 criteria which he thinks to be the defining features of any natural law moral theory, and which he finds in Aquinas, he not only lists the natural knowability and the authoritative universality of all human beings, which we find also in Finis, but he also names the feature that, I quote, the natural law is given by God. Just like Finnis, however, also Murphy puts the connection between natural law and human reason in the center of his evaluation of Aquinas' and any other natural law theory and the paradigmatic character of Aquinas' theory. I quote, quote. Where is my quote? Okay, when we focus on the human's role as a recipient of the natural law constitutes the principles of practical rationality. Those principles by which human action is to be judged as reasonable or unreasonable. And so the theory of natural law is from that perspective the preeminent part of the theory of practical rationality, end quote. By the way, late medieval thinkers like Gabriel Vasquez, following Aquinas here, therefore go so far as to identify natural law with human rational nature itself. However, it seems that if we agree with Finnis' and Murphy's reading that Aquinas is paradigmatic for natural law theory that grounds law in human reason, then at least some approaches like that of Hobbes, and especially that of Spinoza, do not seem to fall under this paradigmatic theory, or at least not fully. Spinoza, for instance, says, "By natural right, I understand the very laws or rules of nature, not of reason, of nature, in accordance with which everything takes place. In other words, the power of nature itself. And so the natural right of universal nature, and consequently of every individual thing, extends as far as its power. And accordingly, whatever any man does after the laws of his nature, he does by the highest natural right, and he has as much right over nature as he has power." Spinoza goes on to conclude that, next quote, "The natural right of the individual man is thus determined not by sound reason, but by desire and power. All are not naturally conditioned so as to act according to the laws and rules of reason. On the contrary, all men are born ignorant, and before they can learn the right way of life and acquire the habit of virtue, the greater part of their life, even if they have been well brought up, has passed away. Nevertheless, they are in the meanwhile bound to live and preserve themselves as far as they can by the unaided impulses of desire. Nature has given them no other guide and has denied them the present power of living according to sound reason, so that they are no more bound to live by the dictates of an enlightened mind than a cat is bound to live by the laws of the nature of a life." End of quote. This is from the Tractatus Theologico Politicus, just to give you an idea of the text. So obviously, nature as a basis for natural law means something very different in Spinoza and in Aquinas. And surely enough, also Spinoza's philosophy has been quite influential, especially for German idealism, so that one could say that Spinoza offers not just a different, but maybe even a different paradigmatic natural law theory than Aquinas. In the following, I will thus present you these both conceptions more thoroughly and give you some questions, or give you one question at the end of the talk. I will concentrate especially on the metaphysical grounding of both natural law, natural right theories, and on the question what function natural law or natural right has for human positive law. So these are two aspects. First, the metaphysical basics, which are very massive in Spinoza, especially, and then the question, how does this concept relate to positive law?